Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gary Barr. I am the chair of the Impact section for IACP, International Managers of Police Academy and College Training, and welcome to our 5th session in our training track here at the IACP. Today's session is Success in Recruiting, Hiring, and Training in the Age of Millennials and Gen Z. So I have two distinguished guests up here with me who are going to present, and the first presentation will be by Brittany Graham, who is the Deputy Director of the District of Columbia Department of Forensic Sciences, where she oversees all training and quality for the agent's public health laboratory. Brittany?
Thank you, Gary. Thank you all. Thank you all. So when I throw out the words of entitled, lazy, narcissistic, self-obsessed, tech-savvy but socially awkward, right? These are all traits that have been used to describe millennials in a number of my training events. So we have to ask ourselves the question then, why are we hiring them, right? If they're that bad, why are we hiring them? Well, unfortunately, we don't have much of a choice because, as you see, from the Brookings Institute, they determined that in 2025, millennials will make up 75% of the workforce. My agency is now at 60% millennial. This is why I started embarking on researching this material, because there was a need in my agency to bridge that communication gap between millennials, boomers, and X-Gen. So today we're going to talk a little bit about generational personality. And overarching, we're going to talk about the training of millennials, how to train them, how to retain them, how to hire them. And Mr. Parker's going to cover that portion. But I wanted to give you some background on what the different generations are, and about millennials and what actually makes millennials tick and why they are the way that they are. So generational personality comes from events that a generation of people experience as they're growing up, at a certain point of time in American history. And it's important to note that this information and this research was derived from studies done in America, okay? In North America, I've also had some Canadians that raise their hand and go, yeah, that sounds like me too. But it does not relate necessarily to China or other countries. So these events shape the values of generation which they later bring to the workplace. So these are your three generations that you primarily see in your agency. You have boomers, you have Generation X, and you have millennials. Millennials are a pretty large cohort. When you look at those age ranges there, they make up from 17 to 36 years of age, roughly. Depending on what researcher you look at, they will maybe, pull a couple of different numbers there, maybe 37, maybe 35, but most of them will agree on 17 to 36 years of age. So what shaped the millennials? It's important to go over what happened and what was going on for millennials during their formative years. Obviously, 9/11 and school shootings, that was big. What was happening during that time? You have a sense of fear that no other generation really faced on a day-to-day level. I know for me, when I was going to school, if little Johnny brought a knife into school, it was really cool. Everybody came to see it, right? Look at Johnny's knife. Even the teachers like, wow, that's really cool. But now what happens? Johnny brings a knife to school, you've got the principal shutting down the school, you've got the police called, and you've got the parents being called and calling the principal all day long. So 9/11 and school shootings have really kind of shaped their view of society and their fears. And that leads to structured childhood. Many millennials, and my daughter is also has this structured childhood as well. A lot of us parents in the boomer generation and Generation X have said, you know what, I know what's out there. I don't need any teen pregnancy, and I don't need you doing drugs. So what we're going to do is we're going to structure your childhood. And it looks something like this. I'm going to pick you up from school at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? And then you're going to get in the car, we're going to go to dance, and then you're going to get out of there about 5:30. At 5:30, I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to already have some food in the car, and you're going to eat that food on the way to the tutoring session, right? And then when we finish with that, I need you to go home, I need you to clean, I need you to take a shower, get ready, because we're going to do it all over again tomorrow, right? How did Generation X grow up? Those of you that are in the 40s, 50s age range, we were latchkey kids, right? It was a little bit different. The parents said, hey, here's a key, wear it on your chain, go in the house, call me when you get there, please don't burn the house down, and here's a whole lot of chores for you to do, right? So you can see from that point how the Generation X already had this level of independence that's built into their life, right? You've got to be independent. Don't burn the house down. Whereas millennials and Generation Z, who's even worse, Generation Z is basically millennials on steroids. These are the ones coming up into the workforce, have had these structured childhoods. Multiculturalism. You can see this every day when you go into Whole Foods or you go into Starbucks, and it's huge for marketing because students now, like the millennials and the Generation Z, are very connected to what's going on in the world. They understand what's going on in the world. There was a study that was done, and I can't get the specific numbers right, I apologize. It's about 84% of millennials were going to buy a product that actually benefited the environment over other generations. Social media networking, and Mr. Parker's going to talk mostly about this, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on the social media and networking, but this has been huge for millennials as well. They grew up with social media. Our networking for Generation X and boomers is face-to-face, maybe telephone calls, maybe some text messages, but we're used to face-to-face. We come to meetings like this at IACP, get to see people that we know. They're different. Driving down the road, my daughter says, I know that girl. I said, who is that? She said, that's Amy. I said, what's Amy's last name? I don't know. I said, well, where does Amy go to school? I don't know. I said, well, how do you know Amy? Well, she likes all my pictures on Instagram. So she knows Amy, and she thinks she knows Amy, and she thinks they're good friends because they like each other's pictures on Instagram. So the idea behind social media and networking is something that is very prevalent in their lives, and that's how they connect. Reality TV and YouTube. How do you think this has parlayed itself into their world? This is what they grew up with, right? Reality TV, YouTube sensation Justin Bieber started out singing cover songs on YouTube, and about 2 years later was selling out Madison Square Garden. So what that does is it tells our millennials that you can be anything you want to be. You can do anything you want to do because you're special. And look, Justin Bieber made it, so you can too. Immediacy. These lovely cell phones have created a sense of immediacy for millennials and for Generation Z. As I said, Z is steroid millennials. Every single bit of information that they need, they usually pull from this piece of device. If I need research done in my agency and I need something done quickly, I go to my millennials first, and then I fact check with my older generation. Because they are the fastest to get that information. When I was growing up, it was, what's the population of Sudan? Well, I went to the card catalog and I tried to figure out and hoped that whatever book I was reading was relevant and new. They can pull it up in 2 seconds. And we're going to talk about how all of these kind of relate back to the workplace. So I'm not just telling you this for fun, I promise. Participation medals. I got 8th place in the swimming competition. Great. How many people were there? 8. Right? Everybody got a medal. What does that also tell you? You're very special. You got a medal. So, how this parlays into what is necessary for you to know in your organizations and kind of parlays into what Mr. Parker is going to talk about is the importance behind what these traits are. Millennials, and I should give you a little bit of information here that I've given this presentation. It's usually about 3 hours. I've condensed it down to about 15 minutes. So I have given this presentation, probably 50 times. My agency, the millennials alone, they love it because they feed me information. And so a lot of this has also been from them as well. They want to have a connection with the larger organizational picture. Oftentimes, we feed our millennials, what do we feed them? Bonuses, right? You get some time off, you get a bonus, you get a little extra pay here. They like the pay. But the reason that they got into that job, especially in public safety sector, is because they wanted to make a difference. And I know that sounds very cliche, and it sounds very, tree hugging, right? But they did, and a lot of them tell me that they wanted to do something in public safety because they wanted to make a difference. My group went into forensic science because they wanted to help the families, or the victims' families. So what we've started doing is actually, no matter how small that particular task is that they're doing, we try to relate that back to the larger organization and why that helps them and why that helps us. They prefer guidance from management and mentors. I get a lot of feedback from my older staff that says, they're just very socially awkward. And I said, well, yes, because they've had the phone in their face most of the time. What I've found is they are socially awkward, so to speak, or it's perceived to be socially awkward, because most of the ones that I work with are not. They're perfectly normal. But they don't know workplace norms. They don't understand the workplace norms because this is their first job. And so we've instituted a situation where we have mentors. We have a lot of boomers that will become mentors to those millennials. So they feel more comfortable with a one-on-one, and they feel comfortable with someone they can trust and someone they can actually talk to and ask their questions that they think might not be the best questions in the world. Hyper-connected on social media and tech-savvy. Work-life integration. And I'm going to go over that in just a second. They are task versus time-oriented. If I give them a task to do that I think is probably going to take about 8 hours and they finish it in 5, they will ask, hey, can I go home? I'm done, right? It's mostly with my interns because they don't understand that they have to work for 8 hours a day. But it's very hard for them to really grasp that whole idea of, I did my job, I did it faster than you needed me to, now I have other things that I could be doing. And so I really hope that when I retire, I come back and work for a millennial, because the world is going to be a whole different place. I'm going to love it. They are opportunistic. Going back to the Justin Bieber situation with YouTube, they are opportunistic. I have a number of millennials that work 2 or 3 jobs in addition to their primary job. And what happens is my managers say they aren't really into this job. They're really not happy here. If they were, they wouldn't be working a 2nd or 3rd job. And it's kind of a loyalty issue to some of my more senior managers. They think that this is a loyalty issue. And when I put it into perspective, that this is the group who has more debt than any other generation because of school debts, and this is a generation that likes to try new things. They're not scared of switching jobs. It kind of puts it into perspective. They need frequent performance updates. They need daily affirmations. I'm going back to the participation medals. And it's interesting. I've got a whole thing on it. If anyone's ever interested, I will be more than happy to email it to you. But it's how to actually praise millennials and Generation Z. It's no longer good just to go up to them and say, hey, great job today. It's not specific enough. They hear that all the time. It's the same issue as seeing your Snapchat account or your Instagram account where someone says, you look pretty today. And the girl says, she just said I was pretty. I thought I was gorgeous, right? I thought it was beautiful. So in this world that we constantly give this feedback and this information back to them on social media, and maybe Mr. Parker will talk about that, I'm not sure. This is important when you're giving feedback to them in a managerial role, to be specific and measurable. You did a great job on that presentation. I really liked how you put together the Excel spreadsheet because it was easy to follow and it was easy for a reader who had no idea what it was to begin with, right? And they need transparency and promotion potential. There's a lot of misconception out there with millennials that they get into the job and they automatically say 2 years later, well, why am I not the boss? I hear that all the time. When in reality, if you sit down and you talk to the millennials and you really kind of hear them out, What they want to know is that mentorship and figuring out, what's my next step? What is promotion potential here? They're very open about that, and they expect you as managers and mentors to be open with them as well and explaining what those next steps are, because they're planners. They like to do that. So I found this, just thought this was interesting. This is the Me generation, about millennials, and this was in 2013 by Joel Stein. It says, millennials are lazy, entitled narcissists who still live with their parents and why they'll save us all. So then we started looking a little bit more in depth, and I found an article by Elspeth Reeve of the Atlantic, and she really did a great job in outlining these different articles that have been written over the decades. This one was actually written in 1976, and this was written about the boomers. This one, 20-something, laid back, late blooming, or just lost, overshadowed by the baby boomers, America's next generation has a hard act to follow. This was written about my generation, Generation X, in 1990. So what does all that mean? I love this. Feel free to use it. It's not that people born after 1980 are narcissists, it's that young people are narcissists and they get over themselves as they get older. Doing a study of toddlers and declaring those born since 2010 are Generation Sociopath. Kids these days will pull your hair, pee on walls, throw full bowls of cereal without even thinking of the consequences. So it does make you think that, you know, there is light at the end of the millennial tunnel. And for all of you millennials out there, I don't mean to bash you. I actually do love millennials. They are my favorite people in my organization because I really want to work for you at some point. So that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, if you would like a copy of my presentation, if you want some articles, I have tons of those, please email me. I'll be more than happy to send it out to you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. We'll have time for questions after Mr. Parker's presentation. Our next speaker is Michael Parker. He's retired LA Sheriff's Department commander. After spending 32 years, he retired last as the Personnel and Training Command commander with oversight, recruitment, testing, backgrounds, and hiring. Mike?
Thank you. So while I'm finding the PowerPoint, I want to ask a question in the room. What's the youngest head of state of a country in the world, or about to be the youngest head of state? 34 years. And where is that? 34? Austria? And you're very close. She's actually 31. So we have a head of state who's a millennial. Are you scared? In fact, Ireland, 38. France, 39. Ukraine, 39. Are we all feeling young? Okay, so, and that's just the short list. So the world has changed, and we have to adapt. Agencies that have not adapted to your target market for hiring are having a tough time. And so how to adapt is part of what I want to talk about, some specific examples that are being done. I also want to point out that most of your newer sergeants are millennials. Am I correct? So think in those terms as well. So they've already changed. The mindset has changed. You can't change them. You can only change yourself and your perspective on all this. So first couple of things I want to mention is your own people are your best recruiters. Agencies that have relatively unhappy employees are not able to hire their attrition, frankly. And some that are happy, you're not able to hire your attrition even. So we're not even keeping what we have, we're losing ground. That is pretty much the case throughout most of the US and many parts of the world. Social media and digital media are very important, and I'm going to give you some examples of why, and most importantly, I want to give you examples of what you can do. So this booklet you see on the screen, if you Google it, you have it. Or I'll tell you a hashtag a little bit later on, and you'll be able to find it easily. Put together through the National Cops Office. So this is directly from that, and I can tell you it's been the playbook of the LA County Sheriff's Department for a couple years before the book came out. so many things that are mentioned. I'm only going to mention a few. So for example, and Brittany touched on several things, I want to make sure and follow up with that. Involving millennial peace officers in what is happening, what is going on, and maximizing the use of social media. You see comments, I see comments all the time about use social media, use social media. Did anybody ever mention that the best social media tool for recruitment is Instagram? Anybody ever mention that? Today's the day, happy birthday. So, okay, so let's accept facts. The facts include smartphones are hijacking our brains. Okay, so let's just accept that. So I'm not here to fight what's going on with smartphones. I'm here to accept it and leverage it, right? So I was out with my wife and my sister-in-law and my nephew last weekend. We were at an amusement park, and at one point in the evening, my sister-in-law takes out her phone and reads it for about a minute and then turns to my nephew and starts grilling him about why he missed the second period in class that morning. Okay? Why? Because schools have apps where you can see attendance of your students. Those of you that are, my kids are in their late 20s, so they didn't have this when they were kids. So she's looking at her phone. She knows, did the kid go to school? Did my nephew go to school? By the way, he had a great alibi. So he's good. He's good. And then also the test scores. I just blurred out the teachers' names because I don't need emails and tweets from teachers saying, why did you put my name on there? Also, as you see an increasing number of agencies either using or feeling pressured to get on board with text to 911, right? The public already expects it. The fact that we don't have it bothers them. Ask someone. Well, don't ask them because then they'll expect you within 6 months you'll have it fully implemented. Also, is how many of you are using the IACP app? Okay, look around the room for a second. If you would, just keep your hands up for a second. And we're not millennials, and the app's available. So I want to get in the phone of the applicants, don't you? This is any given classroom. You say, how many of you have a cell phone? Who's the guy with the flip phone? Thank you. It's funny, because I do presentations all the time on social media, these kind of topics. And believe it or not, the bigger the room, there's going to be one person in the room. He'll have a story for you later on. Is there duct tape or? Never mind. So, okay, so what are we doing? When we want to recruit somebody, we're handing them pieces of paper. Am I correct? We're handing them recruitment literature that's directing them to their website. So we're going to do something a little different, okay? Take out your cell phones. I'm afraid one of you can't participate. If you would text to this number, the number, as if it's a phone number, is 888-777. Now, please don't tell me there's not enough digits. It'll work. In the United States, it has to be a U.S. phone. Those of you from other countries, sorry about that, but I'll bet you in your countries, these short codes are available, but it just doesn't work through Nixle, which provides this one. And then look at the message. I want you to text join LASD. Do it as one word, no gaps. Some phones, especially iPhones, will automatically plug a gap between the join and the LASD. Don't do that. Join LASD. Now, hit send, and if I could, and we're about to find out if this works in this room, because in different places inside, you know, the walls are a little dense. Okay, anybody get a response yet? Okay, so how long did that take? Okay, now click on the link. You got two messages. The first one was, congratulations, you just signed up for this random thing. The second, and I hope I don't get a bill. If any of you have that same text plan that my dad has, let me know. I'll give you a quarter afterwards. Okay? So then, so when you click on that second message link, if it's working right, is it working in this room? Okay, click on that link. And what that's going to take you to is an introductory paragraph. Welcome to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's recruitment information. And then what's after that? It's the dedicated website, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, phone number for the recruitment unit of the LA County Sheriff's Department, and it'll take you to gobs of information ranging from videos that will show you what to expect, hear from recruiters and so on, and then there's a link to a sample written exam and the pre-academy workout opportunity, as well as several other things. I'm going to mention just one of these things because, again, you have a link, and also that's also for you, sir. You can find, well, the app doesn't work either, does it? You're out. So on the app, you'll see there's two handouts. One of them is also going to take you to that if you didn't want to play, or you didn't want to spend the quarter. So these, what this does is it gets you into the applicant's phone. So here is the scenario. You are in the grocery store, the checker, really you've gone to this grocery store several times and this checker seems like really squared away and you want to recruit him. Did you bring the recruitment literature? Do you carry it with you? No, and even in your best of intentions, you don't bring it. But you set up a short code, you can tell them, hey, just click this, in 30 seconds, you're in their phone. What recruiters tell me is that when they're standing at a public event, they're talking to somebody, if somebody is moderately interested, they'll take out their phone and do it right away. If you say, go to our website, or go to our Facebook page, they start fumbling with it, but they're distracted because they can't hear the recruiter, so the natural experience then is to stop and then to listen to the recruiter because you're being disrespectful, right? But we did that so fast, you're now in their phone. We want to get in their phone. By the way, the younger the person is, the more they think this is perfectly normal. There was absolutely nothing unusual about what we did. Now, I'm not saying there's people as old as me in this room, but would you say some of you were like, wow, I didn't even know my phone could do that, right? So, and Nixle, by the way, they have a booth here along the line. If you want to look them up, go talk to them, that's their thing. So, on to the next thing, because again, I got to keep moving, is photos are extremely important in your imagery when you're using social media. I know my colleagues in the PIO office, I used to be in charge of our press office, will tell you that you'll get 5 to 10 times as much traction if you provide a photo. The expectation, by the way, if you're thinking, wow, it's really hard to get photos, or, you know, we were just talking about doing some video. Oh, well, I'm here to disappoint you because the expectation today is live video. So you need to be doing live recruitment talk-ins or text-ins to ask questions. That's a whole nother story. Let's show you an example of a video.
Hey everybody, it's Deputy Branch here with the LA County Sheriff's Department, where I serve as a patrol deputy with Walnut Sheriff's Department. I'm also in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserves, where I've been serving for over 20 years. On behalf of the recruitment unit, we'd like to give a special thanks to all those who serve in the United States military and sacrifice for our country. Have a safe Memorial Day.
Okay, couple questions. One, name something you noticed about this video. Anybody? Something you noticed about the video. Yes, sir.
They used military uniform to attract military athletes.
Okay, great. Military uniform. What's the subliminal message? We like to hire military veterans. Did he say, hey, we really like to hire military veterans? Did he need to? And millennials have been marketed to death. Every single moment of their lives, professional marketing people have been drilling them. When I was a kid, the commercials on TV were the little, was he the Pepsodent guy with a little cartoon, looks like it was drawn by a kid or something like that. That was really sophisticated. These are millennials have been marketed their entire life. They're not impressed with slick. They're impressed with sincerity. They're impressed with real. Was he real? Okay. Subliminal message. We like to hire former military folks. Yes? Okay. What else did you notice? Short. That's right. What's your attention span these days? You're probably, some of you are already tuning me out. I just got up here. So, point is, short. What else? African American? Yes? So what's the subliminal message there too? By the way, highly decorated, very confident. This was put together 100% by deputies with no help from any supervisors. There was a flaw in there. Anybody hear the flaw? Yeah, he said, I work Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and I work at Walnut Sheriff's Department. It's actually Walnut Sheriff Station of the LA County Sheriff's Department, right? Some things, you just let them go. Because these guys did this beginning to end in a couple of hours. Do you think it was effective? Oh yeah, it got tens of thousands of views and all kinds of comments from people. They can relate to it. There is a formula to this, and we've touched on a few elements from that. Again, I'm going to have to cut this short. There's another one.
Quería ser un alguacil porque siempre miraba a la policía en mi comunidad y yo quería ser uno de esos héroes que le ayudaba a la gente y que...
Okay, then she says everything in English, right? And then she goes back and forth, Spanish, English, Spanish, English. What did you notice? What do you notice about this video? Whoops, I'm already going back. Ah, you noticed the background. Do you think that was intentional? Darn right it was. I staged this one. I said, hey, well, what's wrong with that? But did it look natural? It looked natural. The only thing I did to help with this was say, I want you to film it with the congratulatory hugs that are going on. What just happened? What do you think just happened? They just graduated, right? So everything else was done by the deputies, okay? Hey, get us a bilingual, and so what's the subliminal message? Female, did we say we're hiring females? That doesn't go over that well either. But so bilingual, so on, right? So there's a lot of subliminal messaging. You don't have to hit your applicant over the head today. This is an expectation. If you do not have something like this, you need to have something like this. And I have to cut it short again. These are all available
Hi
via
everybody,
that link.
Deputy Zuniga, Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Recruitment Unit. I'm currently in the city of Whittier, Star Center, to explain to you the Validated Physical Ability Test, also called the VPAT. I'm going to guide you step by step as to what is expected, and I'm going to show you each single station and what it is that we go through. Step number 1 is to check in. So make sure you come on in. Let's check in.
What's he doing? He's literally showing them exactly what's going to happen when they come down to apply.
Okay,
Do you think
so you
millennials,
just finished
before they go
checking
to the
in
local
and you waited for a
waterfall in the
while,
mountains,
you just
think
got
they
called up.
Google
What's
it,
the next
get a
step?
YouTube video
We're
before
over
they
here
go.
with my partner.
Oh yeah.
We're going to be stretching
Everybody
all the
tells you this is
applicants
gonna
out.
be great.
During the
This is
stretching process,
normal
you
to
want to make
them.
sure you warm up your
Therefore,
muscles
if you
in
don't do
preparation
it,
for what you're
you're
about
not
to go
normal,
through.
you're a fossil.
The
I
whole
don't wanna
purpose of
work
these
for a
stretching
fossil.
exercises is to warm
I
you up
talk
so
to
you don't
Grandpa
get injured
once
on
a
the
week,
course.
once a
Remember,
month,
you want to
and
try
he
your
talks about
hardest,
stuff I
but we don't want
understand as a
anybody getting
millennial,
injured.
right? So I want to be able to, I want to know you can relate to me.
Okay, so
right?
you just finished
So he's
stretching.
taking them through
Now you
every step of the process. So is this working? Okay, can you see that graph at the bottom? The color's a little washed out. Okay, so if you look at the graph at the bottom, that looks like somebody with a really interesting heart problem. But at any rate, so it starts with next to nothing. We started implementing all these techniques. This is the reach. On Facebook, reach is more important than likes. That means how many people actually looked at your content. Most importantly, and I haven't mentioned this yet, is engagement. The exchange of information. If you're just posting on social media, you're broadcasting. That's like watching TV. And how many of your millennials are cord cutters? What's a cord cutter? They don't have a TV. Both of my kids, they're in their late 20s. They don't own a TV. They have a cell phone. Why would I need a TV? Literally, they've said that. Well, don't you want to watch a show or something? There's plenty on internet. I'd watch it on my phone. Why would you do that? So at any rate, so this shows the reach, and you can track and see how your different things that you're presenting are being taken. I mentioned about Instagram before. Instagram rose so fast, especially because we're having this dialogue with applicants, which takes more explanation. But you can go, all you have to do is go to the link, I just sent it to you. You can go look at these accounts and see what's working. You can't see the stats, but you can see that. So this is another handout. It's on the app for everybody but one of you, that there is this on the app, and it's an article in Sheriff Magazine about how to leverage your Explorer program better, okay? So I'm just going to, since there's an article, we'll go through it. Let's talk about training in the few minutes that I have. How many of you are familiar with below 100? Okay, here's part of your mindset of your staff. What are you doing to look out for me? What are you doing to help me advance? What are you doing to show you care about me, you're concerned about me? And more policies don't impress them. More ways that they get in trouble is how they interpret that. And so this is one of the programs that's plenty of literature readily available, but have you made it available? The subliminal messages, you care about me, you're trying to keep me alive, right? Another thing is, how many of you have the Valor app? Okay, you can get a daily update, free. It's free. Mike likes free. I'm Mike. So the Valor app is every day you get a message to anybody that subscribes to it that gives them an officer safety tip, a career survival tip, things like wear your vest, wear your seatbelt. And this, again, is very normal for them to have apps. This is something that I'm familiar. Anybody use Duolingo? Okay, it's free. I found it on the internet. It's free. I mentioned Mike likes free. Duolingo, it will give you a 10-minute a day foreign language lesson. They have about 10 languages, including Spanish, right now, and they're going to add another 10. How much does it cost? Nothing. You have translation issues and bilingual issues, then there's a way they can advance on this. I was doing a presentation at an annual event that takes place at Harvard Law School. This is a Harvard professor who's speaking to, actually was police union leaders, but he uses this clicker. Are you familiar with that clicker? How many of you used it before? It's a way to engage and interact with your students. They can vote. You ask them a question, and then they vote numerically, so on. Then the multiple choice comes up, and you can see, you're polling the room without anybody raising their hand and feel embarrassed that they raised their hand or didn't raise their hand. There is an app on the phone. You could do it on your phone, but I found that myself and others don't seem to like it as much as these clickers. You can find that on the internet. So he's using it because he's making the room interactive and causing them to look at their phones less because they're looking up at the screen. They want to see what the results were. What does everybody think? Am I like everybody else? Oh, I'm the one guy out of 100 that said the answer was 2. So virtual reality keeps advancing. You see every year here, you see more and more new stuff. Just because it's tech doesn't mean it's good. I can tell you our mobile digital computer deputies that instruct in that course say that because I'm shooting the breeze with them, I say, yeah, you know, I bet your job's easier these days, you know, with all the millennials are so used to all the tech. This is a couple years ago. And he says, no, it's harder than ever because he's been teaching for 7 years. So why do you say that? He says, it's not that it's not so much that they're overwhelmed by technology, they're overwhelmed with different technology. They want to see something that's familiar to them. How do all we feel? Well, there's this system for the car and this system for running plates and this. How exhausting was that to learn all these different systems? They're tired of learning new systems, so you need to make things similar to what they're already used to when you implement technology. Does that make sense? So it is a big mistake to assume because it's tech, your younger employees are going to adapt quickly and like it. If it's familiar, they're going to like it better. So that it's not all about tech, how many of you know Missy Olin? She's an attorney. She created this. How many of you seen this? Okay, nothing technology here. This is a constitutional law crate. Each side, 11 sides, the other is her name on the bottom. You guys can look at it afterwards if you want to. Is 11 sides are different elements of how to remember the laws pertaining to use of force. And they're universal, Graham versus Connor and so on. And there's a guide that goes along with this. The idea is this. We keep handing our people, I'll back up. When I first hired on 32 plus years ago, our use of force policy was how long? How long was yours? Less than a page? Less than a page, right? How long is it now? Unless you're just waiting, unless you're feeling lucky, it's at least 5 to 20 pages now. Who can remember all that detail? So the idea is to get it down, narrow down the detail. Why did she create this? Is because time after time after time, officers in the immediate aftermath of a significant use of force, maybe it's noteworthy, maybe it resulted in a death or something like that, they do their initial interview, they can't really even articulate under what circumstances can they use force. And then they get in testimony and so on. So she created this to try to create an environment where they could more easily learn how to describe that. Those of you who know Gordon Graham, anybody know Gordon Graham, Lexipol? Okay, great guy, does the risk management training and so on. He had the daily tip, the tip of the day, if those of you that subscribe to Lexipol, right? Well, we leverage that in a different way. In fact, Captain Scott Gage, if you would raise your hand, he's the training bureau captain for LA County Sheriff's Department, and Captain Kim Unlin, if you would raise your hand, they were nice enough to come. She's in charge of recruitment personnel for LA County Sheriff, and Lieutenant Bill Yeager as well. So what we did is, Scott, we have the same thing on recruitment.
Hi, I'm Deputy Bridget Smith with the Force Training Unit.
This is the
and this is
internal
your
training video of the
week.
week. So the idea is similar to what you saw before. Make it brief and have the real people that are really training or doing these jobs explain something that is an emerging issue in the organization. Maybe we just had
Today we're
some. So
going to
rather
talk
than
about
wait
karate
6
restraint.
months for the
The
policy
karate
change to
restraint is
come
a
out,
very
they can put a
effective and
video out the
valuable
same
force
week
option.
and
You
hit
can
the
use
high
karate
points.
restraint if you're in assaultive, high risk, life-threatening, or a serious bodily circumstance. The karate restraint is a specific technique designed to restrict the flow of oxygenated blood to the brain via the carotid arteries, rendering your suspect unconscious. Blood flow restriction is accomplished by utilizing arm pressure on the sides of the neck, and this does not restrict breathing. There's going to be 2 different levels of the karate restraint. Level 1, the suspect complies or surrenders and is handcuffed. Level 2, your suspect is rendered unconscious. Once the karate restraint is applied, remember, we shall escalate or de-escalate according to the suspect's actions. Quickly
Okay, so
wrap
you
your
get the
non-gun
point
arm
on
around-
this, right? And you make sure that your videos, your imagery, we've been doing this for many years, reflect the diversity of your organization and reflect the diversity of the community we serve. The LA County Sheriff's Department's deputies have been a majority-minority department for 10 years. Now, it's about 36% white, it's 18% female, Actually, there's about 45% Hispanic, so it's a very diverse organization, about 9% African American, so, and 5% Asian. So the point is, your imagery in everything you do, whether it's recruitment training, you've got to make sure that you show diversity. So, because there's a lot of subliminal messaging in that. Our training rooms, do they look like this typically? The academy especially? They need to look more like this. The problem is we can't afford to have that level of interaction, that closeness. But the millennials especially need that interaction. So where you can do it, you do it. So with that, I'm going to close with a couple things. One is, I will say this about millennials. I compare it to myself. When I hired on, I had no expectation that no one would listen to me. Because my dad wouldn't listen to me. When I would ask my dad, I'd say, hey, Dad, we need a power mower. It's 105 degrees outside. We're pushing the mower. And he would say, and I'd complain, he'd say, are you done? And I'd say, no, we need this, and we need a power edger, and everybody else has a power edger. Are you done? Yeah. And he says, that's why they call it work. So the point is that I then enter the LA County Sheriff's Department. My expectation is I'm going to get the same kind of treatment. What has changed? Brittany talked about it. The expectation from your applicants and your younger officers, which are most of them, is you will listen to them and you will engage with them. And if you don't, now you've got a retention problem, if you don't already, if you're one of those agencies that don't. My last comment in that regard is, when it comes to retention, we're asking the wrong question. We're asking the question, why are they leaving? Well, the question to ask is, why should they stay? And you actually have to ask that every day now, today, in this era. So with that, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike. As you can imagine, this is a very interesting topic, and we could probably spend not only several hours, but several days talking about the depth of the issues. Thank you very much, Mike and Brittany. What I'd like to do is open the session to questions from the audience. We have 2 mics in the room. If you please step up, identify yourself, and ask your question.
Good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
Mark Savage with the Colorado State Patrol. I appreciate both your presentations. They were excellent. Fantastic information. My question is pretty simple. What type, other than what you presented here today, what type of resources would you suggest we as leaders within law enforcement read or collect to learn more about the topics that you talked to today?
So about 6 months ago on Twitter, and a little bit less so on Facebook. How many of you are on Twitter? Okay, or Facebook? Okay, if you go to hashtag hiring cops, or outside the U.S., world hiring cops, you're going to see, I'm the only one doing it, is I've been taking news articles and studies that have been done, and I've been tweeting them and putting them on Facebook. So you'll see, including last night I did it again, the booklet, the 2017 COPS booklet, I did that again last night to make it easy to find. So as far as remember Mike likes free, so there's a free way to get quick access to some relevant articles. For example, in your jurisdiction, it helps if you're going to the city, county, state to say, hey, we need more money, we need more staff, and so on. It helps if you have a comparative articles that say this is a national problem. You can't just say this is a national problem. You don't get very far. But if you have actual relevant studies, that can be of help to you. So that would be my quick answer. Oh, I'll say it again. It's hashtag hiring cops or world hiring cops. And if you don't have Twitter or Facebook, then just ask somebody back at your office and they can look it up for you. I've probably put 75, 80 things on there so far, and I'm going to keep doing it. Eventually, I'll put it on a web page, but right now, that's what I got.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is David Butler. I'm the division captain for the Postal Police in Northern California. And I'm just wondering, how does addressing millennials' needs compare with the salary? Because we're having a big issue with that in our division right now.
Yeah, so, we've had that problem too. And I think part of that goes into some of that so-called perceived entitlement, right? We've had to make it very, very fair, and we've actually looked at our entire organization and all of the different types of jobs that we have to make sure that there is that fair and equitable pay. Because what we were having is some of them saying, well, I'm a technician, but this person's also a technician, and they're making more than me, then why? And so we really looked at it from what's your schooling, what's your educational background, how many years of experience, relevant work experience do you have, and just keeping it fair across the board. We've also looked at opening, when we have positions that we know there's internal promotion that could be potentially internal, we've opened those promotions just for internal only, or those positions that are higher internal only. And then if we don't get any feedback from that cert, then we will open it to all.
I've just add to that I mentioned about the social media element is that the perception from the millennials is that if they go to social media and you don't have a presence there, yeah, they may get paid more there, but they're going to feel like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to fit. And clearly we can't all be the highest paying. How many agencies here are the highest paying agency in your region? Okay, because if you had raised your hand, I think you'd get jumped. But so what you want to emphasize is that they can make a difference, because you can't control that. You know, it's political, all that, how that goes. But emphasize that they can make a difference with your organization, and they'll fit in well with your organization. That's what I would add.
Next
Okay,
question, sir.
Frank Bello, I'm with the New York City Police Department. So one part of the equation is attracting millennials, but the bigger problem that we have is the amount of time between attraction and actually recruiting them to join the force. So how do you deal with that issue, and is there any solution to that? It could take several years before.
Sure. Okay, so several things is one is that they expect at a minimum monthly updates. I can tell you that when I applied, every contact, anything, mom got a letter asking to fill it out for the sheriff. I made a note, like every date of did you guys do that? The date of my written, the date of my oral, the date, anything that had to do with that. And it took 6 months. But that was when, at that point in time, they were really in full swing, and things are more complicated today too. But so my answer to your question though is, you can potentially retain them through the process if you make them continue to feel valued. If you only give them, okay, here's your written date, here's your oral date, here's your physical ability date, they're not impressed, because your competition is reaching out to them. Your competition is giving them potentially monthly updates. In a larger organization, that may be an automated, pre-prepared paragraph, and then the background investigator pulls the trigger. By the way, how many of you realize that your background investigators are part of your recruitment problem? Okay, just saying, because they're a little on the grumpy side. They tend to be more so investigators, and they think that they are the gatekeepers to keep the evil out. And so some of them carry on a little too far, just saying. Another thing is, a lot of agencies can't afford this, but I can tell you that many have increased. When I hired on, I started off as an off-the-streeter. An off-the-streeter is a title we give to somebody who's hired right off the street, and we give them administrative duties and pay them the absolute bottom dollar recruit pay. And why would we hire them when the academy doesn't start for 6 weeks? Why would we hire them? So you don't. That's why. We hire them so you don't. So can you afford as an agency to do that? That's worth going to your city, county, state to say, if we don't do this, they're going to have, because once they're in, I felt like I was in. And I love LAPD. They do a great job, but I got to tell you, they called me to put me the next step in the process after the sheriff's department had hired me and was paying me as an off-the-streeter. Guess who I said no thank you? Because the sheriff's department wanted me so much they hired me right away. In fact, they wanted me so much they hired me even before the academy. It made me feel good. And I'm not even a millennial, clearly. So.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. My name is Sarah. I work for the U.S. DOJ COPS office, and I am a millennial. Quick poll of the audience. How many of y'all are out there? Okay, so there's like 3 hands coming up right now. So I just want to point out that part of the problem is probably the fact that this is a somewhat one-sided conversation. I notice you don't have a millennial on your panel.
We don't.
So, one step would be, how many of you actually have direct reports who are millennials? Raise your hand. So that's still a pretty small number. So just going to toss that out there. We have a project with Howard University, and one of the things that we're looking at recruiting and retaining millennial minority candidates. A lot of the things we found in the research project, and we have a panel tomorrow at 3:30 if you're still here, is there's a lot of invisible obstacles that are generational. Number one, how many people in the room have a visible tattoo policy for recruitment? No visible tattoo. Yeah, good luck with that. What are the invisible objects that y'all have found in your research and your practice that are not even simpler than making people feel special or giving participation trophies? What are some of the generational turnovers that should be obvious but may not be when you've been approaching recruitment the same way for so long?
Okay, that was a lot. So
Invisible obstacles to hiring millennials that may not be obvious from the generation gap.
may not be obvious from the generation gap. I guess I'm still processing the question. So, okay, so those types of things. Okay, so let's talk about drug use for a minute. Does that fit in with what you're saying?
Sure.
Okay. Are you all still saying, we haven't lowered our standards? We all say that, right? Have you changed your standards? Okay. We serve the public. And you referenced tattoos. Has that changed dramatically in the last 5 years? Dramatically, right? Visible tattoos, what's the public reaction? Some of that has to do with the public, what's the public standard where you are, right? Beards. Rarely saw beards before, that's increasing as well. So these hidden things that you're talking about actually have a higher effect on decreasing your minority applicants than you do otherwise. So as well as some of the other elements, such as drug use, is that do you allow some experimental marijuana? Now, I'm not taking names, but experimental marijuana. Have you changed to, oh, maybe we should allow a one-time use of ecstasy or something like that, right? Is the gentleman from the DEA here? Recruiter from the DEA? I spoke to him yesterday, and he was saying that they still have the same standards and they're having extreme difficulty. Will that potentially affect your agencies and all of our agencies as the legalization of marijuana increases across the U.S.? Now, I'm not a fan of let's just find out, let's legalize more and more ways for people to get wasted and not function. I'm against all of that. But we have to deal with these realities, and you have to deal within the reality of your jurisdiction, and studies like the COPS Office and the booklet that the COPS Office puts on is a huge help.
I'd like to just follow up a little bit. My world is a little bit different being in the forensic science, but we're closely related, right? Yep. And what we found is when we were looking at, we started looking at high school students. And, you know, being in the district, we were really hitting the DC schools and looking at the high school students. And some of them were interested, but what we found was they had kind of hit that point of saying, well, science is not that fun. So what we found is actually going younger than that, and going out to some of these middle schools and getting out there, because they're largely ignored, at least from the forensic side. We try to get them a little later, so that's something to think about. The other thing that always happens in my presentations is I usually have a boomer that says, when are the millennials going to change to what we want? And I said, you're asking the wrong question. We have to change to what the millennials are looking for, because they are the future of our organization. So, just to add on to what Mike, mentioned with that is these agencies are going to have to look at what your policies are in place, because you are losing out on some extremely viable candidates for some things that may not be as important anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Because I'm dying to ask a question. I'm dying to ask this question. So what do you do when you have a problem employee that's a millennial?
You guys don't.
Except for my millennials.
I want to see where I went wrong.
So what I've had a number of perceived problem millennials, and usually that equates itself into some of the stereotypical traits that I threw out earlier, oh, they're narcissistic or they're entitled or whatever. And what I found was really having a sit-down, a one-on-one sit-down, maybe at a coffee shop, across the street. Luckily, we have one across the street. Kind of taking them out of the office, taking them, somewhere where it's comfortable to have them talk to me, really opens the door. I had a situation with a young lady one day. She came into my office, and she said, and we just hired her, and she was working midnights, and she said, I want to know when I can go on days. And I immediately thought, oh my God, you entitled millennial. So instead of that, I did my inner yoga and I thought about it and I said, well, let's have a seat. Let's talk for a minute. And when we started talking, she said, you know, listen, she goes, I want you to know I love this job. I have always wanted this job and I'm so happy to be here, but I have a young daughter and I didn't think that it would affect her this much, me working midnights. So I just want to know what the time frame is of when I could go on days so I can tell her and we can, like, you know, kind of plan for that. Totally changed it for me. And at that point, I realized you've just got to be open, because it goes back to that situation of a lot of times this is their first job and they don't know how to navigate those questions. And she thought coming in and being very strong-willed with it of, I want to know when I can go on days, was going to work with me, right? And so I would just say open up, really be human to these millennials. Millennials are very close to their parents. A lot of them call their parents and every day long, everything's going on. Mom, guess what happened? They want to see you as some role in that, being their mentor.
I'd add that, again, is that my perception is they want what I wanted as a young deputy, but they expect it. And if they don't get it, they will leave. Am I right? Do you see them leaving? They will just leave, and they'll go to another agency or just get out of policing altogether. And so what's more effective is, rather than, look, the salty old Sarge is a dinosaur, and my bet is that he's not relating real well with millennials if you have the salty old Sarge still around. Because the salty old Sarge says, you're late again, get your act together, right? As opposed to sitting down and saying, hey, I noticed you've been late a couple times recently, tell me about it, what's going on? The same kind of normal conversation you would have with a family member who you actually love. I'm not talking about that brother-in-law that comes over on Thanksgiving, is that where you ask them what's going on and you mean it. And you're not allowed to look at your computer or your cell phone during that conversation. So that is my partial answer to that.
Any other questions?
Okay, you want to give one last comment? I would say, across the country, we'll ask this question. How many of you have about a 50% decrease in applicants right now? Raise your hand. 50% or more. If you would look around the room, guess what? You're not special. Is that everybody's having the same problem for all those reasons we already know plus. So I can tell you a huge mistake that's going on with your typical recruiter, and we don't have time for me to ask it, but go up, and by the way, everybody's a recruiter. You're a recruiter, your recruitment person's a recruiter, every single person's a recruiter. Go up to your recruitment person or any employee and say, what is unique about your agency? And I will tell you, I've not talked to a recruitment person, part-time or full-time yet, who answers that question in a way that is anything other than general, talks about, oh, you get to serve, help people, they need unique things about you because you're competing with all your neighboring agencies. With that, Gary?
Thank you, Brittany, and thank you, Mike. Excellent presentation. After we conclude, please feel free to come up and exchange information with our presenters and tell war stories, because I'm sure we all have them. I know I do. And I am now certified, as a result of hearing this presentation, that I am indeed a fossil. On behalf of the impact section, I'd like to present these certificates of appreciation. First to Brittany.
Aww.
Thank you very much. And I have a gift. And Mike.